OMG, Trump's an idiot, he said in one message. America will get what the voting public deserves. A little weird coming from a public servant. Around the time of the Democratic convention, Strzok sent this message to his girlfriend, quote, "Congrats on a woman nominated for president in a major party, exclamation point. About damn time, exclamation point. Later, he enthused that Hillary should win the 2016 presidential race, quote, 100 million to 0. During the Republican convention, Strzok ridiculed the Trump family, messaging page in all caps, turn it on, 3 exclamation points. The douchebags are about to come out. You can tell by the excitable clapping. Keep in mind, this is the man the New York Times described as, quote, one of the most experienced and trusted FBI counterintelligence investigators. Other fawning accounts in the press painted him as a fusion of Sherlock Holmes, J. Edgar Hoover, and Batman. When you read his text, Peter Strzok sounds a lot like the 6th host of The View. That's not good news for Robert Mueller's investigation of Russia. The legitimacy of that investigation depends upon the public's faith that the people doing it are unbiased and capable of high-level thought. One man who potentially could restore some legitimacy to this investigation is the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. Yet in testimony today before Congress, Rosenstein insisted that there's no problem at all. Everything is fine.
Expressed concern with certain aspects of certain things done by the FBI, but in general, throughout my experience working with FBI agents over the decades, I found them to be an exceptional group of public servants, very loyal, faithful, and dedicated, and I believe some of the finest people that I know.
Rosenstein went on to say he has total confidence in Robert Mueller.
It would be very difficult, Congressman, for anybody to find somebody better qualified for this job. Director Mueller has, throughout his lifetime, been a dedicated and respected and heroic public servant. He, after college, volunteered to serve as a Marine in Vietnam.
He's a Vietnam veteran? Okay, so is Roy Moore. That's an impressive resume point. Obviously, America thanks him for his service. But what does it have to do with the question? Nothing, of course. It's a non sequitur. Worse than that, it's misdirection. Nobody's attacking Mueller as a man or questioning whether he'll make it to heaven in the end. Instead, the question is, why did Mueller hire so many partisan Democrats to investigate a Republican president? 9 out of 15 are Clinton donors. At least one worked for Hillary personally. Was that a wise idea? Meanwhile, why did Mueller hide the reason for Peter Strzok's demotion for so many months? And why has he consistently stonewalled Congress's many attempts to exercise its constitutional oversight of what he's doing? To answer that last question, we're happy to have Congressman John Garamendi join us. He is from California, and he's a Democrat. Congressman, thanks for coming on.
Good to be with you, Tucker.
So I would think that you would share my interest and everyone's interest in seeing that this investigation is not only fair, but has the confidence of the public.
Exactly right.
Yeah, exactly right. So given that we now know that Peter Strzok was a seething partisan, does it bother you that he had a hand in so many key investigations in the last 2 years?
As near as I can determine, the current FBI director is also a partisan. He's a Republican. He's given a substantial amount of money to the Republican causes around. And so within the FBI, there are men and women who are Democrat and Republican. I would probably, and I think you might agree with this, that the majority of the FBI team, agents and others, tend to be conservative and tend to be on the Republican side.
That tends to be true.
Yes,
that tends to be true.
Yes.
And yet Robert Mueller himself was so concerned by Strzok's partisanship that he pulled him off the investigation.
As soon as he found
down
out.
to HR.
As soon as he found out.
As soon as he found out, apparently, we're not exactly sure because he won't answer basic questions from Congress about this. He hid for months from Congress the existence of these texts. He won't answer questions like, what else did Strzok do? What else do we know about Strzok? Does it bother you as a member of Congress that the FBI is stonewalling your body's efforts to get answers?
Not at all. There is a criminal investigation underway. There is an investigation of national security of extreme importance to this nation, to the future democracy and the way in which we run our elections. And we ought not be in any way slowing down, harming, or stopping, or rather, in one way or another, causing that investigation to not go forward. It is about our democracy, and it is about a foreign government involvement in the democracy. What it has to do with the president is just one piece of it.
It's one piece, but here's one piece that we think we know, that the FBI apparently used this now famous Steele dossier
Yes.
in order to inform its investigation,
Yes.
and it perhaps may have paid for that dossier. Now, that's something that already happened. You're not going to be affecting the investigation by getting an answer to that question. The FBI will not answer the question, did they pay for that dossier? To what extent did they use it? It's been discredited, as you know. Why doesn't your body have the right to know that? I'm confused.
Whether they did or did not, the question begins with what is the dossier? The dossier has been a template for the investigations. It turns out that much of that dossier has already proven to be accurate and correct. It was important enough that the entire intelligence community looking at it informed the president that it existed, so that the president would know that these issues are out there and that they were being...
Where'd that information come from, the information you just described as important and central to this investigation? Do you know where it came from? It came from Russian intelligence in part. Does that bother you?
You mean the information
in the dossier that you just said informed the investigation. So the claim is Russian intelligence influenced our election. You just said that the dossier, provided in part by Russian intelligence, influenced this investigation. Why wouldn't that bother you as a citizen?
Apparently, and we do not yet know where all of that information came from, but we know that it came from an individual who was involved in the British intelligence services, was years, perhaps 3 decades,
right?
3 decades working on the Russian portfolio. So he knew what was going on. He had his contacts, some of whom were willing to talk to him, apparently Russians and others. So he put together the dossier. The dossier becomes an extremely important part of what has happened. It is informative.
But you don't see this as a problem? Wait, hold on. Your concern, which I think is a fair concern, is that a foreign government may have influenced our election.
Well, we do know, at least by the intelligence agencies, that they did.
Okay, but we know that that dossier came in part from a foreign intelligence service, and the U.S. government may have paid for part of it. So why isn't that vital information? Why wouldn't you be calling the FBI today and say, what? You paid money for information from Russian intelligence?
No.
Tell us.
No. The information came from Mr. Steele, a retired British intelligence agency.
And where do you think he got it?
He got it from a variety of sources, some of whom were undoubtedly Russians, either in Russia or maybe.
And that information provided by the Putin government influenced a U.S. investigation into a sitting president. So you just described.
I think you're way out on a limb here.
No, I'm not at all. These are publicly available facts. You're saying that that's okay, that information from Russian intelligence is influencing an investigation of the president. That seems like a big deal.
Back up a bit. We know from our intelligence agencies, who undoubtedly got information from their sources in Russia and other places, that the Russian government attempted to, and in fact did, engage in influencing the American presidential election. We also know from our intelligence agencies, who undoubtedly got information from Russians somewhere in the government or whatever their sources may be, that not only did they attempt to influence the presidential election, they attempted to hack into our electoral process.
But
that's where
by your own description, Russian intelligence is influencing a federal investigation into the president.
Oh, you are way out on a limb.
I am not out on a limb at all. No, I'm not. We know that some of that information in the dossier came from Russian intelligence. You said the dossier was a basis of this investigation.
No, I said it was an element in the basis.
It was a basis of it.
It informed.
So look, here's one thing we can agree on. The FBI should settle this for us. Did they pay money for that dossier? What was the extent of their contacts with Mr. Steele? Where did the information come from? Congress can't get answers to this. Why?
It may be interesting, but so what? So
because it would show that a foreign government is influencing a federal investigation into elected officials.
Back up.
Seems like kind of a big deal, no?
No, it's not necessarily a foreign government. What we're talking about is that the information in the dossier and the information collected by all of our intelligence agencies, some of that information undoubtedly came from sources in Russia. We do know this. We do know that from all of that gathering of information, the dossier being but one piece of it, perhaps even a small piece of it, we do know that the Russian government at the highest levels attempted and in fact
we know because
involve
our
themselves
Congress,
in the
which is supposed to be providing oversight of these agencies and of this process, is content to sit back and take the word of federal bureaucrats. I don't understand why.
Well, you saw these hearings. They've been going on for the last...
You guys could compel them to answer your questions. You could shut them down, and you should. I mean, how would... they're basically saying, we're not answering your questions, and you put up with that?
You are dealing with a fly on a dog's back here. What you need to do is to take a look at the overarching issue involved here. There are things we know. All of our intelligence agencies said Russia involved itself in the American election. Our intelligence agency said that Russia hacked our electoral system unsuccessfully, at least as far as we know.
They're hacking our investigation. I just want more information, and I think we can both agree.
We all want information.
Good. Congressman, thank you. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
There are plenty of other tough exchanges during that testimony on Capitol Hill. Mr. Rosenstein, here's a selection.
Do you have any opinion on the lack of the fruit from the poisonous tree that might have been erased by Peter Strzok?
Well, as a legal matter, Congressman, I can tell you that if evidence is tainted, then that would raise a concern for me. But typically, our cases would be prosecuted based upon witnesses and documents, and not upon the agent, unless the agent personally were a witness in the case. But that would certainly concern us if there were any tainted evidence in the case.
Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University Law School, and he joins us tonight. Professor, what was your take on those exchanges today?
Well, we didn't learn a whole lot, did we?
No, we didn't.
You know, the problem is that many of these questions really don't go to witnesses. They don't go to sensitive investigatory issues. They go to the role of prosecutors. So I don't understand why some of those questions couldn't be answered. I think what we have is we have allegations on both sides of the political aisle, both involving foreign influence, both involving questions of political corruption or influence on the Department of Justice. And it seems that we're in agreement. All those are bad things. So the question is, how do we respond? And I think that it'd be nice if both parties would say, all right, fine. There are so many questions here. Let's have an independent and full investigation on both sides. Let's investigate it all. Let's be transparent. Let it be independent. I think Congress can investigate the DOJ allegations, but we do need a commitment on both sides to say, at the end of the day, the American people have a right to hear it all. And we didn't get that today.
And we have an obligation, I think, to preserve some public trust that our system isn't corrupt. And that, I think, is the point of the independent counsel, right? To take it out of the Department of Justice a little bit anyway, so there's no political interference. Given that, why in the world would the FBI apparently, and the investigation, hide these texts from Strzok, hide the news from the Congress for months that he was demoted? What would be the point of that?
Well, I find that perhaps the most troubling aspect of this. There's no reason for this information to have been withheld. And I think it's an example of how agencies thumb their noses at Congress, because Congress doesn't enforce its contempt authority. Those people should have been held in contempt. Congress has a right to this information. It's our government. And these are very serious allegations. You know, when you talk about someone involved in this core investigation, we're spending millions, but more importantly, we all have a lot at stake here. And if there are people there who are partisan, who are biased, we have a right to know about it.
Well, in this case, Mueller, it looks like, did the right thing. So
yeah.
It turns out he has this guy, very high-level FBI official, Strzok, who stepped outside the lines pretty dramatically, and he demoted him and sent him down to the HR department. Why would he be uncomfortable telling Congress of that? It does shake your faith. It suggests there's something else going on.
I think that's exactly right. I think that they fueled a lot of this narrative, a lot of these concerns. The only way to sanitize this is with exposure to sunlight. And they are resisting these disclosures that they need to have been made. Some of these texts are deeply disturbing. Some of it just stupid. You know, having major justice officials go to the campaign party of one of the two major candidates is just stupid.
Well, it's especially weird. I mean, the congressman who just talked to you, I thought, made a fair point, which is a lot of these people have political opinions, and that's right. Okay. It doesn't mean they can't do their jobs right. But if you're an independent counsel and you're under intense public scrutiny, and you hire 9 out of 15 investigators who are donors to the other candidate in the last election, one of whom worked for, you're a law professor here in Washington. Is it impossible to find competent investigators who didn't just donate to the other team's political campaign?
Look, you can walk out in any corner in D.C., throw a stick and hit 20 competent lawyers. You could hit 100 more that are not competent, but you could hit a lot of competent ones. There's no need to come up with a list that can be challenged. Mueller began this with the criticism of some of us. I thought Mueller's appointment was a mistake. I think he's going to do a fair job. I think he's going to, at the end, he's the special counsel is going to say that. But his connection to Comey, and more importantly, his interviewing for Comey's job, it really baffled me that he'd even be on the list. You would think that after that start, he would sanitize this team, which he obviously didn't.
You think so? Because public faith is at stake here.
I think it is.
Thank you, Professor Gibson.
Thank you.
More evidence of flubs, failures, foul play keep piling up at the FBI, as we said, shaking the public's faith. The agency does not believe it should submit to oversight of Congress or anybody else. Why is that? We'll investigate next.